sassafras bark tea. Sassafras bark tea is high in saffrons and is dangerous to the human body. Saffron itself will kill an individual. My parents, the people that adopted me, were Hoosiers from Indiana and Ohio. And they had me grow up on sassafras bark tea as a blood purifier. And it didn't kill me. And the reason it didn't kill me, my parents weren't that intellectual. They didn't know enough to be able to take the saffron out of the sassafras bark. If they'd taken the saffron out and given it to me straight, I wouldn't be alive today. But they weren't that smart, but they gave me the whole tea. Now here is the principle. Saffron is one of our trace minerals, extremely valuable. It'll clean that heart, the arteries, the veins, cuts the cholesterol, gives elasticity. This is terrific. Saffron is so important. When it's used alone, it's vicious. When it's used alone, it'll kill you. But in its wholesome state, and this is where that word wholesome comes in. In its wholesome state, it has with it the other trace minerals, vitamins, etc., that's in the sassafras bark. And all of them together with the saffron, the balance of them acts as a catalyst. And that catalyst makes the saffron do its job so that it's innocent as water, but the most perfect aid that you could ever give for the heart, arteries, and veins. That must be in its wholesome state. This is where the FDA, bless their souls, missed the boat. They isolated. They have isolated many of these, but one of them that we have isolated ourselves as scientists is cinchona, the Peruvian bark. The Aborigine, the Indians from Central and South America, they knew that if they used the tea from Peruvian bark, they would never get a fever. They'd have no problems. If they got the fever, whether it was a killing fever, a high fever, yellow fever, jungle fever, they could clear it with cinchona tea. Our laboratories wanted to get this material so that they could help people here not get the fever, or if they had the fever, get over it. They went down and picked up a lot of the Peruvian bark, brought it into the laboratories, and they decided that they did not want to advise people to have a cup of tea so many times a day. This is medieval. This is back to witchcraft again. That's silly. It's got to be in a capsule, a tablet, or a pill. So they took the Peruvian bark and started to tear it apart. And this is what's called processing. Processed foods, foods is a bad word. It doesn't go with processing, actually. But processing is what is putting the world on the skids today. Because of processing, we have a weaker world than we ever desired to have. Here we have got processing being used in the procedure of making the fever medicine. So they take out the coarse particles of the bark, and they throw this out because that's not necessary. They throw this out, and they wind up with a little white crystalline material. The white crystalline material is made pharmaceutically fine so that it can be put into capsules or tablets, and you can get it in any drugstore. Go to any pharmacy and tell them you want something to get rid of fever, and they'll sell it to you. Go in and ask for it by name. Well, they'll say, have you got a prescription for it? This particular particle from cinchona, from the Peruvian bark, this particular one can be very damaging to you. You use too much of it, you'll be deaf. use an additional amount, it'll kill you. Anybody know the name of it?
Quinine.
Quinine, right. All right. Now, quinine has to be with a prescription. But you can take the Peruvian bark and you can drink it by the gallon if you can hold that much. You can drink as much as you want, and all you do is get good. It can do no harm to anybody. And the reason? Your quinine is the trace mineral that will kill you, skull and crossbone. But the balance of the minerals in Peruvian bark acts as a catalyst. And it works together. And it cannot harm you in any way. All right, this is what Ezekiel would advise in the medicinal land. But let me take just one example, please. One example on the nutritional end. As we say, here are the nutritional herbs on this side. All right, this will be the grains. We have ignored the grains for years and years and years. We've gotten away from the whole wheat and the whole rye and the whole barley. Of course, we have notification on the package that it says whole wheat, whole rye, whole barley, whole blah blah. But it's a little on the sad side because it isn't whole. Our friend Dr. Kellogg would today roll over in his grave and bawl if he saw what his grandkids were putting out on the market. He put out a good whole grain at one time, the best that's been on the market that's been made up that way. But what do we do today? We take the wheat. This is the best example we can get. Take the wheat and we take the outside coat off of it, which is the bran. We discard the bran and give it to the horse, like a horse, because it's too coarse for us good folk. And we take off the next two layers, which is, that's called the shorts. And those next two layers is made into chicken feed or turkey feed. Now what have we got left? White flour. You think I'm going to ridicule it? I'm not. White flour is great. White flour is one of the finest things that we have got, folks. It's terrific. Now you take a big pot of white flour and put water in it and stir it up. And you have got a paste. You put it on that wall, put wallpaper over it, and you can't get that wallpaper off. It glues it right on, puts it right in, and it stays there. You can't get anything better than white. Well, of course, they put the 5 coal tar derivatives in there. That should make it a little better, you know. How long can you live on it? Well, that's something else. Why do we talk about paste? You know, we don't drink paste, or do we? Well, we have our pastries, we have our white breads, we have our Twinkies, we have our miscellaneous things, and we have a pot to mix them in too. This is the pot, big pot. We mix it in, and that liquid makes up our starch. And that starch you can put on that wall, but we don't have any wallpaper. Well, we have something else down in there. We have some extra fecal matter. And so we put the paste on, and we put a layer of fecal matter, and another layer of paste, and another layer of fecal matter. That's what causes constipation. You know, that bowel gets smaller and smaller and smaller, layer upon layer. In autopsy, a person has died, we want to see what's been wrong. We cut them open. We make an incision across the descending colon. And you hold it up, and it looks like we have cut a tree trunk in two, because it's got layer after layer after layer solidified in there. This layer upon layer doesn't tell you the years, but it tells you which years were the lush ones. This is the sad part. We've allowed this to happen in our bodies generation after generation because we eat like our parents ate, and they ate like their parents ate. And we have been going downhill, weaker and weaker bowels. We've got to reverse this. And when we reverse it, we're going to strengthen them. Well, this particular principle of grains, we have got to eat them in their whole state. And if we don't, we're in trouble. Wheaties, that's supposed to be whole. There's a lot of them that are. But are they? We have a test for that. The word in the scriptures that say all wholesome herbs, that means the life therein is in their original state. We have the test for this. And this is how we test our herbs, nutritional herbs. We take our grains. We have a principle that we have taught for years, and that's pre-soaking and low heating. We pre-soak the grains as many hours as we need to, sometimes overnight, sometimes longer. Millet doesn't have to have as long as soaking, of course, as turkey red wheat. They regulate according to, and beans, of course, an extra day or two. But as we soak these up, they're pre-soaked. What this is actually doing is like the rain coming out of heaven, falling on the soil and wetting the seeds. And as they get soaked up, they come alive. The water seems to be like the water in the womb, brings new life. And as that new life comes, fine. But unless some heat comes with it, we're in trouble. I was back in Wichita, Kansas, where they'd put in their 4th planting. They got plenty of rain. So much rain and no sun that the grains rotted. They wouldn't mature. They've got to have some heat. All right, so the rains come out of heaven and then the sun comes down. And the sun brightens things up, warms it up, and it's the sun that changes the grain from a 5, which is acid, which cannot be assimilated easily by the human body, but the heat changes this to a pH 7, to 7.4. This change by heat, but it must be a mild heat, it can't be a hard heat. But that mild heat, like the sun, pre-cooking or low heating, this is what changes it. We had an interesting case. I've been teaching this for quite some time, and I remember out on Redwood Road, a fellow there raised his hand one day when we were talking about grains, and he said, hey, he said, you know, I tried that system of yours. It sounded kind of kooky, but he said, I thought I'd try it. He said, I tried the double boiler deal. That is, he had water in the bottom one, and now in the top one he had about 1/3 grain and 2/3 water. You can regulate it. And he'd put it on. Well, he said he had soaked it all night the night before, and then he let it set, and he'd put it on for a number of hours to preheat. Well, he said, when he opened it up, he said it was delicious. He said it was really very tasty. You know, that was good. But he said, being a bachelor, he said, I didn't want to scrape everything that was left in the pan into a dish, wash it all up, and then put it back into the pan again the next day. So he said, I just took the whole double boiler and put it in a cool place. And the next morning, he said, I decided I'd heat up my breakfast. So he said, I swished the double boiler, and there was water in the bottom, so I turned the heat on. I went in and shaved, showered, and so forth and so on. And when it came back out, he said, my breakfast was ready. He said, I could see the steam coming up. And so he said, boy, I looked forward to it, and I raised the lid, and I looked in, and there, he said, there was green growth all over it. Sprouts had come all over this whole thing. All right, the day before, it was just soaked in such a little sprout it wasn't noticeable. But one day, and he had green growth. Well, he said, you know, he said, I believe you now. Well, of course, he had to learn the hard way. But it was good because those sprouts were still excellent to eat. Here is the key that we have got. One of the most important keys, and that is the fact that we can take wheat, barley, rye, millet, corn, any of them that we wish to, pre-soak them, low heat them. Now, I named those. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel? They lived on pulse, which is lentils. Yeah, they lived on lentils and were the wisest people in all the kingdom. And yet you go back to Ezekiel 1, and he tells us to eat the lentils and the beans. Did you get that? And the beans, and he mentions beans, and the wheat and so forth. So that they're all there for us to use. All right, now you can soak any of these. You can make some of the most delicious casseroles you have ever eaten from these grains that have been popped open. These casseroles, put your other things that you're going to add to it in the low heating end of it, and they will be absolutely exotic. You can make barley puddings, you can make all kinds of things besides the casseroles. Here's the key. We make a test piece of ground out in the back. We dig 2 furrows. Now in the first furrow, we plant some Wheaties and some granola, a loaf of whole wheat bread.
7th grade.
Yeah, oh yes, 7th grade by all means. A muffin or 2 and a donut. And now we fertilize them well. We can't be stingy about it. And we irrigate them. And we talk to them too. Now in the second furrow, we put in some of the cereals that were left for breakfast. Of course, they're all whole, uncracked, pre-soaked, and preheated. Now, sometimes we like to take several of those grains and mix them together. They're delicious. It's a little butter and a little honey. Boy. Well, anyhow, I've got some cereal left over. If you've had too much made up, plant that. Plant some casserole that's left over from lunch. Some of your beans that were left over, and your barley pudding. Plant that. All right, we got 2 rows now. And we irrigate, we fertilize, and we talk to each of these, do a nice job on it. Days go by, and that one row that has the grains and stuff we planted in, little sprouts are coming up, and everybody likes to watch things grow. Plants and kids and things. Well, there they are, they're coming up, but the other row doesn't do anything. It's just sitting there lazy. Not a thing. We think we've got to give it a little more time. We fertilize a little more, water it a little better, talk to it a little bit more. Days go by, nothing comes up. So we dig under there to find out what, and it's dead. Why is it dead? Because you can't get life from death. It was dead in the first place. It was processed food. Food, I hate that word with it. Processed merchandise. That's what it was, processed. And it wasn't the wholesome that the Lord talks about. So what have we got now? We have got that which is good for man, which is wholesome, that's growing. And that which is dead, just do a little thinking now. What are we going to have for lunch? Well, anyhow, stay with live food. Just keep it as live as possible, and you'll have longer, better life. But if you're going to take dead food into your body, you're taking death into your body. And this is severe. If we will use your whole grains, we have got the key now that is one of the most important keys we have. Oftentimes we wonder, why is it that we have a teenager or two, and how could such a wonderful mother and father have such an obnoxious brat as reproduction? It's almost impossible to believe. Well, it isn't their fault. We're the one that fed them. And we fed them processed merchandise. We didn't give them good food. We, in speaking at our national health federations and cancer victims and friends and so forth, we hear this from medical doctors and naturopaths and different ones. But I remember one medical doctor made this statement at one of our conventions. He said, we have taken children that were so impossible, hyperactive, screaming individuals, and he said, we have changed them from their snack materials to 3 good meals a day. And he said, and I'm talking about fruit, vegetable, grain, nut, and seed meals. And he said within weeks, those children have changed from brats to little angels. Why? Because we are rebuilding a marvelous structure that's falling to pieces, decaying, and we're filling her back out again. And this principle, your very grains are loaded with hormones, with estrogens, with all of your Bs, your B1, B2, B6, B7, B15, all of them. B109, 118, 232. You don't know about those. Well, I don't either, but they're in there. They're all there. Every one of them. If we will leave them in their wholesome state. We say, sure. If you're in a very terrible condition and need a little of this to act to help you out while you're weaning back to the right diet again, okay. But if you can get along without it, so much the better. Now these, every time we recommend our mucusless diet, and that's what our fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds are. This is our mucusless diet. We add wheat germ oil. And why wheat germ oil? Because we've been so devoid of wheat germ for so long. Now the wheat germ alone will do a little good, but so often it's stale. It causes hardening of the arteries, arteriosclerosis. So we use the wheat germ oil. We will add also some cayenne. Now why the cayenne? Well, it's hot. But that isn't the only reason. We recommend a teaspoon 3 times a day. We don't advise starting off with a teaspoon. You'll learn the laws of jet propulsion if you start right off with it in a large sum. But we recommend 1/4 of a teaspoon with plenty of water. 3 days a week. I mean 6 days a week.
Can you use the raw wheat germ rather than the oil?
Use what?
The raw wheat germ, the flaked wheat germ rather than the oil?
We'd rather the oils. The oil is actually the blood of the vein. Yes, back here.
Wheat germ oil's rancid most of the time.
The people who advertise this are the people who don't know what they're talking about. I'll tell you the ones that are rancid. The ones that are in bottles and the ones that are not hermetically sealed. I traveled for a while with Jack Dumont, who was the national wholesaler for wheat germ oils. And he said, Doc, what type of wheat germ oil do you use, Viobin? And I said, no, I use Rex brand. Well, he said, why don't you use Viobin? Well, I said, it's often a little on the rancid side. And I said, I've never found one container of Rex brand that's ever been rancid. The Rex brand comes in a metal can. It's hermetically sealed. And it stays fresh until it's opened. And if it's got stale after you've opened it, before it's been all used, you can tell the person is not using enough. Yes, because if you use the right amount, it'll come out just right. And that has, my Rex brand has traveled with me at all altitudes and at all temperatures and all over the country. I mean, but it's good.
What's the name of the Rex brand?
Rex brand.